Thank you very much for joining us for episode 7 of Worldwide Slot Car Chat. I'm your host, Greg Gaub, otherwise known as Mr. Flippant. I've been racing hard-bodied 132 scale, both digital and analog, with a digital club and an analog club for about 10 years now. But I'll race anything if you want to race. So we're going to do quick introductions for the people who have already been here before, and then we'll have Michael tell whatever he's wanting to tell. So Kelly, I'll let you go ahead.
Kelly Avery. On the forums, I'm Genie2369. I race SCX. I'm switching over to Scalextric digital. Both of them are digital. And just like Greg, I'll pretty much try anything. I'll race anything. And I'm in Omaha, Nebraska, trying to get racing interest up here to try to get a club started here.
Thank you very much. And that reminds me, I'm in the Seattle, Washington area. So area is a good thing to share. So if anybody watching this is in an area of one of our members here, I guess, feel free to look them up. I'm sure nobody here would be bothered by getting a random email from somebody or whatever. So if you could tell where you are, if you're willing to just give a general city location, that'd be great. Ron, why don't you go ahead?
Sure. I'm in Kennesaw, Georgia, which is about 20 miles northwest of Atlanta. My name is Ron Neubauer. I go by the screen name of Rolo 9th SS or 9SS. Been a slot car enthusiast since I was a kid. Started off with AFX HO stuff in the 70s. Migrated to SCX Digital about, 10 so years ago, and moved from that to Scalextric Arc Pro currently. Big 132nd guy.
All right, thank you very much. And
Yep.
Jeff, it's your turn.
All right, thank you very much. Jeff Nagel, aka JD Nagel on forums, living in the Indianapolis area, northeast side, outside the loop. Scalextric guy, have a ton of track, and I like the 132 platform. Although I think 124 would be kind of cool to see. I know we can't run it on Scalextric, but seeing some of you guys and others that I've met doing the complete custom design of even on the 124 scale is pretty amazing stuff. I love that.
Thank you very much, Jeff. And Mr. Schwartz, would you like to give us a quick bio?
Yeah, Al Schwartz, aka Ecurie Martini, messing around with this stuff since 58. And in the Baltimore area, we've got a group of about 20 people within a 100-mile radius, 6 home tracks, and we get together before all this hullabaloo on about a monthly basis for regular scheduled races. 132nd scratch belt is my game.
Excellent. Thank you very much. And I don't think Mr. Hendrickson has been on before. Have you, Steve? You're muted because you're making noise. I muted your microphone when you're moving around your device. We're going to go ahead and get your full history here, but we're going to take Michael first because he was here first. So Michael, why don't you go ahead and tell us whatever about yourself you'd like to tell us.
Sure. I'm Mike Russell. I'm out of the Denver, Colorado area. I work for an electronics company. I'm a business analyst there. I just got into, since this more of the stay-at-home orders have been being pushed out by states, I've been looking for different hobbies and interests that, I could get into. I remember racing slot cars when I was a kid. My dad had a 100-foot set. I do not remember, much to the name of it or, I don't know the size of it. I figure it's probably, am I still there? Yep. I figure it's probably a 143rd. Right now I'm racing 132 Carrera Digital. I got a triple power GT set. I've noticed that, the very first couple days I crashed my Porsche into the back end of another car and the front end lights went out. So I really don't know how I'm supposed to fix those things, but I did try to take apart my cars and try to improve their handling and whatnot. Got some parts and what. And so I guess I'm looking for, probably like suggestions on how to help things out. I'm not really handy when it comes to like soldering or whatnot. I have not done a lot of that. I am interested in getting Squigglies cars and try to put in a Carrera chip in those. And there is I'm not a member of any club. I really don't have a call sign or anything. I could go by Agent Venom, I guess. Yeah, I'm just looking for things. I'm pretty interested in doing the digital racing, but I could look into the analog as well. So once this quarantine is passed and we're allowed to out a little bit more, I'm looking to try to find a club where I can go. And I'm trying to get some interest from some of my coworkers. Right now, they're kind of thinking it's a little pricey. So I don't know. We'll see what I can get from them. And that's pretty much it. Just really just picking up the hobby again. With the Carrera set, I could go with the 124 as well, but right now I'm just doing 132nd or 132.
Perfect. Yeah, well, we'll be happy to help with some of those things that you mentioned. We'll dive deeper later on. And Mr. Hendrickson, would you like to tell us a little bit about yourself? Let me see if we can unmute you here. We can't hear you. Do you have an unmute button on your? There you go.
You good now?
There we go. Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, I'm up in Minneapolis, Minnesota. On the forum, I go by Racer1H. We have a core group of 6. We've been going for about 12 years up here. Had as many as 12. The core group is solid 6. The track in the house here is a 130-foot carrera. Let's see, what else should I say? Our main purge now has been 3D printing Can-Am cars. Just finished a slot car video. I think I posted that about 2 or 3 days ago. I don't know really what else to say. I've been in the hobby for about 15 years, and that's sort of about it, guys.
And that's fine. And I'm sure you'll have more to say later once we start talking about some of the things that you do. And it looks like, Michael, do you run Carrera digital or Carrera analog?
We run Carrera analog. We have 12 different classes, choose one each night. It's fairly sophisticated timing system. We've kind of redone the software ourselves. So we hit go at 7 o'clock and it just takes over. Nobody touches a thing, and it sets up the races, figures out the laps, figures out the points, and at 9 o'clock, it tells you where everybody did for the night. That's it.
Awesome.
It doesn't stop. There's 1 minute between races.
The least amount of work needed, the better.
Yep. So
all right, I'll open the floor. Sorry, go ahead, Steve.
I'm done.
Okay. Well, I'll open the floor to anybody who doesn't have a camera. If you're just microphone only and want to introduce yourself, you're welcome to do that. I see a Lloyd and Portals and a TK and a Bob. All right, hearing none, feel free to interject at any time, gentlemen. Again, if you're not speaking, please mute your microphone so that noise doesn't interrupt somebody else. Since we're more or less done with introductions, I do have some topics that were suggested in the past, as well as a couple that were suggested for this week. But I'd like to go ahead and have help Michael out a little bit here, because he mentioned a couple things with his car. You mentioned you had a rear end shunt and your Porsche front lights aren't working anymore. Is that right?
Yeah, the front lights decided. I mean, I don't know what I even did, but I opened it up and I was trying to check the connection and seeing if the front the LEDs were damaged or anything like that. And I didn't really see anything, so it just kind of was odd. My Lambo and my Ferrari, I've probably crashed numerous times. I've taken out the back wing on the Lambo, so I glued it back in. But yeah, I just don't know what happened. It's just kind of like it was working very first time, and then a few runs around, and then next day, after what I think was it just rear-ended another car, they just stopped working.
Yeah, that might have been coincidental. If you opened it up and looked and couldn't find any physical indicators like a broken LED or an LED that came off of the board, or broken wire, or a broken connector, or disconnected, or the connector to the chip maybe having come loose or have a broken wire somewhere.
Well, does Carrera sell those even? So if I just got like the
connectors?
front end LEDs with the little connectors, I could connect it back to the chip, right?
Most manufacturers that sell sets, we'll call them the toy manufacturers, Scholastic, Carrera, SCX, Ninco, others, generally don't sell spares. They used to. That was fairly common a while ago, but that's not common anymore.
Well, it's not like I'm doing a lot of nighttime racing, I guess. But
well, on Carrera Digital, the headlights are helpful with the whole fuel thing. I know that they flash in different ways, so that's helpful.
The backlight should flash as well, right?
I think they do, so that might be enough. But go ahead and take a closer look at it. You might find that there isn't any obvious damage, but the wire that comes from the chip to the little connector, and then the wire from that connector to the LED board, there might be just a broken wire inside the insulation that you can't even see. And so, maybe just replacing those wires is enough. You can carefully take those plugs off, get some really teeny weeny flathead screwdriver and pry up the locking tab that holds it there. You can get that out of there and, replace the wires and stuff. Or, if worse comes to worse, you might find a junker, car, same model, maybe an older version, that you can just yank that piece out of or swap the chassis or whatever.
Well, yeah, right now I'm buying everything new. I'd have to go online or at least look for somebody else that would be selling it. I'm just trying to establish things. I really don't have much of a set right now. It's more of a starter set. So I'm trying to expand on that first before I get into more of a setup where I'm going to probably have to put in my garage a track setup and then try to get more cars and whatnot. So I'm just really trying to get myself going on this. But, I didn't understand all of a sudden why that opened up where the lights were not working anymore.
If the set and the car is fairly new, like you just got it from the store, Carrera,
it's within a month.
Within a month, yeah. Carrera cars are pretty robust. They're tanks. For slot cars, they're tanks. So they can usually take a pretty big beating before anything goes wrong. So the first thing you have to do is go ahead and get back to the retailer that you bought it from and say, hey, the lights went out on this car, and they should do something to make it right. Send you a replacement car or let you return the thing or something. You might not want to return the whole set just to get a replacement set. So it's up to you, what they offer and, what you want to do. But Carrera of America is usually pretty good about warranty support as well. And there's retailers all over the states that'll warranty support if it's a product that they sell. If they sell Carrera product, some places will warranty support a product, and then they'll deal with Carrera. So it's worth getting in touch with your retailer. Worst case scenario, calling some other retailers that carry Carrera and saying, hey, this joker of a retailer wouldn't help me out. I'll be loyal to you if you help me out.
Yeah, they're out of Buffalo, Minnesota. I've already been contacting them on things because I'm always just curious on the status of my order, and then when are things going to be back in stock again. So
cool.
Yeah, thanks, man.
And you were also asking, beginner, what can I do to kind of improve my cars, just kind of in general?
Yeah, I've greased. I watched the tutorial videos, and I've greased the bearings area. I've greased. I didn't do the around too much around the. God, I can't even think what it's called. I was, for the most part, I was watching tutorial videos. I was following what they did for tuning cars, and so I changed out some back tires. I got dogs around here, so I got to clean out some of the hair that gets involved in the cars. So, but I try to pay attention. I know there's Carrera, I believe, or even I think an app. There's an app that has what is the app? Is it Pro Race? It's not the Carrera app. It's another one.
For race management?
Smart race.
Smart Race is a popular one.
Yeah, they have a Facebook, so I've been trying to, watch what they do and how things are operated there.
Is your finger over your microphone? Because we can barely hear you.
Yep, probably.
There we go.
Yeah, I got another dog that joined me, so I got a couple dogs now.
Well, I was just going to say, obviously you found a couple of good resources. It's pretty much tires, right? So if you stick with having traction magnets, or you remove the traction magnets because you want to get a little drifting going on, it's all about the tires. Tires that are good for no mag are going to be, good for mag racing too. So you just kind of got to choose, what kind of tires you're going to go with. If you go with silicone tires, pretty much want to stick with silicone tires for all your cars. If you go with rubber, then you can do various types of rubber. If you go urethane, then you can kind of go between urethane and rubber. But if you go silicone, then you're going down silicone road, and you're staying on silicone road.
Yeah.
You can't really mix silicone with any other type of tire and get performance out of both of them. So, but that's what I would say to pretty much any newbie about slot car performance. Tires.
Yeah, I use the urethane, the Paul Gauge urethanes right now. And I noticed that my Lambos, the time on that one slowed down a little bit on that one. But my Porsche and my Ferrari, they sped up. I also changed the connecting points near the guide as well on those, just to try to keep the handling on. So that seemed to improve a lot as well.
So do you still have the traction magnets in there? You sticking with that for now? Yeah.
Yeah, until I become good at this, I figure this. I'm not really doing anything competitively yet until I join something, a club or whatnot. I don't know if I have the knowledge behind this to sit there and try to set up a club for my, for this area, or it could be just a group of us friends that I finally get. So it's all learning for me right now.
A club is one or more people who say, I'm a club. So that's up to you whether or not you make a club or call it buddies having a race at my house.
Yeah, well, it could be more or less buddies at first, but I would like to have some kind of competitiveness with it.
Yeah.
We can call it a club if you want, but
you might as well.
I would like to try to find a club, which would be nice.
That's true. The digital clubs are few and far between. So you're more likely to find an analog club nearby than digital. But don't let that, move you away from digital so much. Like, you can be like me and others, race with an analog club and, race digital at home, or, make your own digital club. What I was going to mention, you said you were using Paul Gauge urethane tires. I love Paul Gauge urethane tires. He does mold them slightly big so that you can true them down and still have them an appropriate size and be trued. So if you just slap them on your car without sanding them at all, then they're going to be bigger. And so that means your magnet is further away from the track and therefore doesn't have as much grip, as much pull. So your cars that slowed down probably slowed down because they're tailing out a little bit more because they have a little bit less magnetic downforce. And your cars that sped up because now they have better grip because their old tires were not very good traction to begin with.
Well, I figured for the connecting points to the track, I figured that helped out a lot because that Porsche really increased. Even though the lights aren't working on it, that car has got dramatically faster. I improved probably on the lap. I probably improved almost 0.3 of a second on the lap. And I have a small track right now, so 0.3 is pretty good.
Yeah. And when you say connection points here, you're talking about the braids that touch the rails?
Yes.
Okay, so we call those braids because they're made of braided, metal. And yeah, braid setup makes a big difference. Depending on what track you're on, you would want to set your braids up completely different. And with Carrera, since the rails are very slightly proud of the track and relatively far apart, they're away from the slot. Generally, you want to have your braids kind of fanning out a little bit at the tips.
Okay.
And make sure they're kind of bent away from the chassis so that they kind of press down on the track with a little springiness. Because Carrera cars are pretty heavy. They're not going to really wheelie out just because you made your braids too springy. But yeah, mess with braids. You'll find it makes a big difference.
Well, I might have to improve my or sand down those tires for the Lambo and see if that helps out with them.
Yeah, if that's the one that slowed down, then yeah, buzz them on some sandpaper. Make sure they're glued onto the wheels. Using clear nail polish is good because it holds really well, but comes off if you need to remove the tire.
Okay.
You don't want to just put it on and then sand it, because as you're sanding it, sometimes the wheel can turn inside the tire, and then you've made it unround again.
Okay.
Somebody else.
Yeah, I'll probably just take them off, and then I'll have to just take them off and sand them.
Michael, for what it's worth, there was a conversation that Greg had put together. These things all just happened organically, like 2 or 3 episodes ago, where everybody in the group seemed to start talking about tires. And it was just more, at least for me, because I'm in the same boat you are, only I'm not Carrera. It was just a sit back and listen, because of all the knowledge that was being passed between them was like, oh, wow, this tire, that tire. And like Greg was saying, what material works best for what you're trying to accomplish. Even though we're kind of in our infancy, it's still like, well, it's nice to know, because if I'm zooming around my track, all right, well, that works really well. That's a nice, cool little tire. It helped out a lot. So go ahead and go back to some other episodes that Greg had put out. Those are a big help.
Thank you for that. Definitely, yeah, there has been lots of great information shared by some people who've been slot racing for a very long time. So it's, when you have some time, definitely, watch some of those older episodes. Before I move on, do you have any other questions or anything that you'd like some more information on or help with?
No, Jeff, my internet was kind of cutting out there again, so I didn't catch the trail end of your comments there. But I could go back and watch the videos, check them out.
That's basically what he was saying, is that we shared a lot of tire information that,
Okay.
even if it wasn't directly applicable, like we weren't talking about your brand of car and your brand of track and stuff, you can still, garner some information from those conversations.
Okay.
Does anybody have any interesting news or show and tell that they would like to talk about?
I've got a little show and tell on my latest project.
All right, hit us, Alan.
Okay. If you followed some of the forums, you know that I'm working on this odd joint project with a chap in Sweden on a Lotus 23 project. He's doing the bodies, and I'm working on the chassis. Excuse me. That's not the latest illness. It's a side effect of a drug that I take. The Lotus 23 is a very small car. The most you can fit into the back of one of those is an FF050 motor. And I've been working on a way to deal with that. In the past, I have soldered an axle carrier directly to the motor housing of the typical scaly FC130 motor. I was reluctant to do that in this case for 2 reasons. One, I wanted the option to be able to change the motor. And secondly, I was a little bit leery of soldering in a motor which is much smaller, has smaller magnets, and much less meat to dissipate the heat. So I designed, and I'm just trying today, a motor carrier for it. And I'll put up the carrier. This thing is laser cut out of 35 thousandths stainless steel. Okay, here it is as it comes from the, I don't know exactly how this camera, yeah, it'll focus that close, won't it? This is a laser cut part. And after it's bent up, this is what it looks like. Okay, you can see where the bolt for the motor is. There are 2 tabs down on the sides. They will accept a tube which will hold the axle, and the 3rd tab, slightly bent up and out from there, is for the rear body mount. And with a motor in it, the whole thing looks like this. One thing I will note in passing is I had originally thought that I might have to solder some of the junctures together to make something sturdy enough. I can tell you after the effort it took to bend this stainless steel, that's completely unnecessary. This thing could fall off a 10-story building and survive. It will
Why stainless steel?
Because I don't like things to rust. I guess I'm a little bit of a nut about this. I think the chassis should look as good as the body. And stainless steel solders quite nicely if you use the proper flux. It doesn't rust. You can get a nice brushed finish on it. And it's also a little bit softer than steel, so it's a little bit, you know, a carbon steel, so it's easier to cut.
Okay.
So the main chassis rails will be 50 thousandths stainless rod. It'll be ball bearings all the way around, front and rear. And the finishing touch will be a rattle pan that I'll probably make out of some material which I have in hand, which is 40 thousandths nickel silver. Nickel silver is nice when I have to make the parts myself because it's much softer than stainless and a hell of a lot easier to cut.
Okay.
So that's the current project.
Very
A word on braids. We were talking about them just a minute ago. A trick that Alan Smith taught me some years ago. Let's see if I can find a piece here. This is an experimental chassis. And what he did, and what he showed me was this. Number one, at the tips of the braids, take a pointed screwdriver or a scribe or something like that and fray them so that the very ends of the braids are frayed rather than smooth and solid. Then take the braid or the guide in your hand with thumbs on the braids. Squeeze down and press forward. This will flatten the braid against the bottom of the guide. And then you take a pair of pliers or tweezers or even your fingers if nothing else is around and just take the very end of it, which is frayed, and bend it up a little bit so that the whole thing is, you know, sort of like a shallow L, which will put the tips that have been frayed solidly on the rails, but will keep the rest of the braid flat so it doesn't tend to lift up the front of the car. That's my old wives' tale for today. One note in passing, I was fortunate to be able to make this tonight. They have released the restrictions here in Maryland somewhat, so my barber shop was opened. Had I not been able to get to the barber today, I would not have come on for fear of frightening people.
Well, I'm glad you got a nice haircut for us, just for us.
Right.
And that's a great tip on the braid. You know, that's definitely how you want to set that kind of braid system up. Usually for you know, like a routed track with braids for rails, that works really well. One interesting thing that I discovered as a Scalextric, not only Scalextric Digital, but a lot of the analog clubs that my analog club has are Scalextric Sport Track. And that is that Scalextric and early SCX track, the slot is created by the rails, right? So you've got the metal rails and then they go down in the slot, and that's the slot. Other systems have a liner, you know, in the slot, so it's plastic in the slot, and then the rails are out a little bit further. But Scalextric sport rails are like this, you know, L shape. You know, your braid rides on the top, but the slot has a little bit of rail in it. And what I discovered is a really, really effective way to get good, consistent power on pretty much any brand car running on Scalextric track is having the braids twist up against the guide so that the tips of the braids want to kind of ride the edge of the rail into the slot. Obviously, you don't want them to go down in the slot and bind up or anything like that. But if your braids are starting like this, flat against your guide, or the flat part of the guide, against the chassis of the car, and then here's your guide blade. If they're flat like this at first, then kind of pick up the ends and give them a twist and push it up against the flag, the guide flag itself, so that the braids have a little bit of a twist like that at the end. And when the car is, when the guide is riding in the slot, the braids are going to be mostly on the rails, as they should be, as they normally are. But they're going to kind of want to ride in the middle of that, into the slot a little bit on that inner edge. And it just makes, and give them a little springiness so that they want to go down towards the rail. Every time I do that to one of the guys' cars, his car is stuttering or it's not getting good power, or it's losing brakes at the end of the straight or whatever, his car's not running very well, I'll say, do you want me to look at your braids? And they'll just hand the car over and I'll do my little thing and slap the car on, and I have to warn them that the car is going to drive better, because half the time they assume it's going to continue the way that it had been, and they end up crashing because they're actually getting more power, or adjusting their brakes because now they're getting better braking because of that better contact with the rail. And it only works on Squigglies track because of the way that the rail is on the inside of the slot. The rail goes into the slot. It doesn't work on any other kind of track. So when we then, I've adjusted their braids for a sport track, and then the next race we have is on one of our routed tracks with copper tape or braid or whatever. And I'm like, well, did you fix your braids for this track? Because doing that for the Squigglies track is absolutely wrong for pretty much any other track. So then, they'll flatten them out and, fray them and do like Alan was saying, because braid setup matters based on the track that you're running on. So hopefully that helps somebody who's running on Squigglies classic or sport track. And I did notice that we have a Lloyd here. I don't think Lloyd's been on before. Lloyd, would you like to tell us a little bit about yourself?
Hold on.
There you go.
Can you hear me now?
Yep.
Yeah. I'm Lloyd, go by the name of Lloyd L on most of the forums. I'm having a problem hearing myself here, so anyway, I am interested in what you're saying because I don't do digital or 1/32 scale. I'm 1/43. So there's only a few of us around, and I thought it would be interesting to see what people are saying in other scales, because it all transfers over. We learn things from whoever's doing things in different scales, and I'm even learning things about from what I'm hearing with your digital, even though it doesn't apply to what I'm actually doing. It's always interesting as well to be able to put faces to names. I'm seeing all you people on there that I know the names of some of you, but I've not seen you before. Anyway, I'm doing 1/43. I don't do ready to run anymore. It's pretty well all wood track, copper braid, copper tape, and scratchbook cars. I mainly make my own resin bodies and brush chassis. In 1/43, we don't have we don't have any club racing as such, so it's only proxy racing or at home with friends and whatever. So we can run what we like. We don't have to follow any rules or anything. I make brush chassis because I like them. If we were running club racing, we might have to have the stainless steel and everything that is needed to go faster these days, but I can work with brass and a soldering iron. I'm not used to the other materials. Got a few examples of some of my cars here. By the way, I'm mainly doing rallying. So you'll see rally cars here, and I'll lift it up, and I'm looking at the can you actually see it? It's so small. Okay. Porsche, that one, we all know Immense Miniatures, Mark's company. That's an Immense Miniatures chassis in there. One of his 3D printed ones. Had that car a lot of years. It still runs very well. One of the things about this scale is we used to rely a lot on Ranch Design, a company in America there, who made lots of pieces for our small cars and small 1/32 cars. Since Ranch Design disappeared, we've had to get a lot more inventive about the parts we use and dig them up from all over the place. Gradually, we're finding other ways of doing things, and a lot more sidewinder gears are turning up in these little white plastic nylon things that you buy cheaply from China. So we're learning where to get things, and we can now pretty well make whatever chassis we want. Or I think somebody mentioned 3D printing. There's an awful lot happening in 3D printing in our scale as well now. Peter Pfister from Austria, who runs the annual Pronomag, which is our main proxy of the year. Peter is on, he uses the name Fuetze, Pfuetze, on Shapeways. And he makes an awful lot of interesting chassis meant for 1/43 cars, but are very useful in small 1/32 as well. And it's these the 3D printed chassis are what they are used in the racing, because in our racing, as opposed to 1/32, these cars don't weigh anything. They're very, very lightweight. And what you were mentioning about the braids, contact on braids on digital and other things, is very, very important to us because we haven't got the car weight. So we use soft braids, and quite a lot of the time we don't use any braids at all. Yeah, I haven't got any you can really see here, I think, but we have Peter makes some guides that have just wire coming out the bottom. They're strands of wire, and you mentioned the combing of the braids, combing the ends out of the braids. Well, the wire does the same thing, but in these little lightweight cars, that gives more than adequate connection of the power, and sometimes better than braid. So we have a whole lot of different things that we're dealing with, and of course, all of the racing in proxies is non-magnet. So we rely very much on urethane tires and a decent deep guide and soft braids. We don't have an awful lot of choice in motors. So most of our motors, somebody there mentioned the FF050, the slimline electric motor. We use that in some of our bigger cars. But generally speaking, FF030s, these little boxer motors from the HO cars. Indeed, whole HO chassis can be very useful to us, but it's a completely different world to what you race.
Yeah, and thank you very much for joining and sharing. I am familiar with a lot of those things that you were talking about. I usually pronounce it Pfuetze. I don't know why. And I've seen the Pronomag proxy and the cars that you guys make and the tracks that you guys run on, and they're honestly just as good as any 1/32 or other kind of cars, especially like you were with the brass chassis and now the 3D printed chassis. I remember Ranch Design. It's too bad they disappeared, but it's good that there are a lot of resources you guys are taking advantage of. So yeah, it's great that you joined us and share your expertise in 1/43 scale. And yeah, like you said, a lot of the stuff that applies to 1/32 helps 1/43 and probably vice versa with your, the 3D printed stuff and the braids and all that. So yeah, I love it. Thank you very much. Did you have anything else you wanted to add?
Not really. Like most people in the hobby, I could talk all night, so I won't do that.
Absolutely understand that. And yeah, we've only got 2 hours, so let's spread the talk around. I don't want to be the only one talking here. Before I dip into my list of topics, did anybody have anything else that they wanted to talk about, or questions that they want asked to ask and answered by the group, or anything like that? Interject if you do. Wave your hand at me. All right, I'm going to dip into my topic list here. Okay, so one that was suggested a couple of times in a couple of different ways, and I cannot help very much with this one, so hopefully some of you guys can be the experts and be helpful. They asked for spray painting tips, and another person asked for airbrushes for customizers, recommendations for new users. So just kind of general painting tips, airbrush recommendations, airbrush tips, that kind of stuff. Anybody want to tackle that one?
I'll give it a go.
Go for it, Alan.
Okay. Interesting this comes up because I spent about an hour on the telephone earlier today with Mark Huber. Mark Huber on the forum is Big Sky Banker. He's from Montana. And I guess when, once a teacher, always a teacher. I started conversing with Mark perhaps 5 or 8 years ago when he was a novice at this, and started feeding him bits and pieces of what he should do and what not do. So I consider him to be my student. So I sort of look over him. There's been a lot of discussion about painting techniques, spare airbrushes, and so forth on the forum lately. I thought I'd throw in my 2 cents. I have converted almost completely to airbrushing for a couple of reasons. Number one, rattle cans work, not as well as they used to, by the way. They did not survive well the transition from Freon to CO2 as a propellant. I've got some 30-year-old rattle cans that still work very nicely. The current ones are not so good. There is a little bit of a learning curve to airbrushing, not as big as one might think. A couple of differences in terms of worrying about spray booths, and so on and so forth. When you use a rattle can, about 70–80% of the paint you spray goes somewhere else, not on the model, because they are, a big kind of fan type spray. Exactly. Airbrushing, you really can focus right on what you're doing. That's number one. Number two, so far as the environmental effect goes, on a typical 132nd car, and this would be even more the case for a 133rd, 43rd, the amount of time you spend putting a coat of paint on the body is probably only 15 or 20 seconds. And it's pretty closely focused, so you're not spraying that much around. Third point that always comes up is, well, how about all the cleanup? Well, cleanup for my airbrushing takes me about 2 minutes. I use a top-loading airbrush, so you don't have to worry about siphoning out of a jar, nor do you have a jar to clean. I keep a supply of Q-tips for those across the water. I believe they're called cotton buds. And when I'm done with the coat, I wipe out the cup with one. I put in 5 cc or so of solvent. I take another fresh Q-tip, slosh it around, wipe everything off, discard that, put in another 5 cc of solvent, spray that out, take a Q-tip, wipe out the tip of the airbrush, and take a final 5 cc and spray it through. The whole process might take 2 minutes. It certainly doesn't take any longer to do than it takes to describe. There's simply no comparison with the results that you can obtain. There is a small learning curve, but it's not that bad. I find it just as easy to manipulate the trigger on an airbrush as I do to get any kind of modulation with the squeeze top on a rattle can. My 2 cents.
That was a very high value 2 cents, if you ask me. Do you have any particular types of airbrushes or brands of airbrushes that you would recommend to somebody starting out?
The only ones that I have ever used, I have 2 airbrushes. They are both Iwatas. They are not cheap, but they are bulletproof. I have had no failures with them and no problems. Once or twice over the years, I've gotten a clog. I've had to disassemble them and soak them and reassemble them with no problem. They are very smooth in operation, very progressive, very easy to use. I'm lazy about it. I don't thin my own paints. I buy ready thinned lacquer paints from 2 or 3 vendors, and they have a wide range of colors. Certainly, I have never found the need to go beyond them. These are lacquers. One thing I will add is that if you clear coat, and these lacquers all end up with a flat finish, so a clear coat is necessary. If you clear coat with one of the 2-part polyurethane catalyzed clear coats, you have an absolutely bulletproof finish. I mean, get it here. Just a minute. This is one. This is a C-type Jaguar. This car spent a year on a round-the-world proxy race. It has been untouched since it came back. I don't know how many times the decals were handled, how many times it went off the track. Well, it went off the track enough times to fracture the chassis in 4 places, but the body is perfect.
That looks as good as my models fresh out of the paint booth.
Yeah,
better.
The 2-part catalyzed polyurethanes are they're like a diamond coat. They're rock hard, and there's nothing you can do to them aside from actually attacking them with sandpaper that's going to mar that finish.
That looked fantastic. I don't use airbrushes myself because I do so little painting. I got an airbrush a long time ago, and it was just a cheap piece of crap. So I didn't really do much with it. But I have heard terms like single action or dual action or double action or something. Can you tell us what that is?
Yeah, sure. You've got 2 parameters to control in the airbrush. One is the flow of paint, and the other is the flow of air. A single action airbrush, typically you set the air pressure, and that controls the flow of air, and then you use a little, the trigger controls the flow of paint. A dual action airbrush requires a little coordination, and I'm going to expand on that a little bit. And that basically what you do is you press down on the trigger to control the flow of air and pull back on the trigger to control the flow of paint. Okay, sounds a little bit tricky, but one of the issues I have in modeling is I have severe carpal tunnel syndrome in both hands. My hands don't work well at all. I tell people it's sort of like working with mittens that have been soaked in ice water. I have no problems with my airbrushes controlling the 2 actions together. And it gives you a very, with a good airbrush, it gives you a very smooth control. I can't speak to the bargain airbrushes. I've always used Iwatas. They're not cheap, but as I said, they're bulletproof.
Thank you for that. And Eric, I just wanted to point out that I'm muting you because you're making noise. So when you want to speak, you can unmute yourself. I don't have to unmute you, but if somebody's making noise, I'll mute them. So that's why that kept getting muted on you. There was something else I was going to ask about airbrushes. Oh, compressors versus canned air. I assume compressor is the way to go. Do you have a compressor, Alan, or do you use canned air, or what do you prefer?
I use a compressor. Actually, the compressor I'm using now is a very, very old one. My father was a physician, and he had this little old compressor in his office. He was an allergist, and he would occasionally use aerosols in treating patients. I put it aside some years ago and bought a Black & Decker can type compressor rather cheaply from Home Depot. That worked beautifully. You pumped up, it had a tank on it, you pump up the tank, the compressor cuts out, and you can paint for an evening on the air that's contained in the tank. That unfortunately fell victim to a divorce settlement. So now I'm back to using my little on the floor compressor. It's, probably so long as you have a decent regulator on it and a water trap, it doesn't make a whole hell of a lot of difference. If I were to start out to buy a whole system again, my investment would be in the airbrushes and rather than in the compressor. Cans of air, they're going to be a pain.
So even a cheap compressor is better than a can of air, would you say?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
I can't disagree with that. I mean, just my limited experience with rattle can spray painting, and got to soak the stupid thing in hot water to make sure it doesn't fizzle out on you and stuff like that. So it's like, yeah, the airbrush can would do the same thing. So I can't imagine that a compressor would not be better.
One note aside, I forgot to mention, most of the paints that I use, all of them that I can think of, I typically spray at about 18 to 20 PSI, relatively low pressure. The cleaning, I just reach down, crank the regulator up a bit, and I do my cleaning at about 35 to 40 PSI.
A little bit of extra oomph to get the schmutz out, right?
Yep, exactly. And as I said, it's a 2-minute process.
Yeah, it sounded like as you were describing it, you could be doing it while you're, like you said, it takes as long to describe it as to do it.
Yes.
Yeah. So did anybody have any questions about painting or airbrushes or airbrushing in general before we move on to another topic? Eric?
I have a question. So I'm late to this. Do you have your airbrush, is it a gravity feed or a siphon variety?
Very good question. I have both. The first one that I used was a siphon variety. I bought a gravity feed one with a relatively small cup to use primarily with the alclad metallic lacquers because they're quite expensive. And, using a bottle and a siphon feed, you end up wasting a lot of paint. What I found was that for painting, let's say, a 1/32 body, in most cases, to put on a single coat of lacquer, the cup is sufficient. And in worst case, you take 10 seconds to pick up another 5 cc of paint with a disposable polyethylene squeeze syringe and pop it in there. I now use the top feed airbrush essentially exclusively. The cleaning procedure that I described was for a top feed airbrush. If you're using a bottle and a siphon, it's going to be more complicated.
Excellent. Does that answer your question, Eric?
Absolutely.
Wonderful. Does anybody have any other questions for Alan or anybody else about painting or airbrushing? All right. Well, since we got a couple of new guests here, Eric, you've been here before, so I'll let you do a quick about profile of yourself, location, name, and all that stuff, whatever you want to share. And then we'll have my friend Russ tell us a little bit about himself or whatever he'd like to share. He's one of the analog slot racers in my area, so it's good to see Russ on the chat. Russ, keep your microphone muted when you're not talking. If you make noise, you might find yourself muted because that'll be me muting you. Eric, go ahead and tell us a little quick bio.
Well, real quick, my name's Eric. I go by think Eric P on Home Racing World right now. Basically, I'm in Knoxville, Tennessee. I digital race, run carrera system, built my own wood track with that product. I know a few of you have heard that way too many times now. My brother's got a plastic track, and we got a group of about 8 or 9 that get together. We haven't been together since February, though. We're waiting to get together again sometime soon.
Wonderful. Thank you for that. And we do have, you came in late, so just so you know, we got a couple other Carrera and Carrera Digital people on here. Russ, if you want to go ahead and unmute yourself and just introduce yourself, tell us anything you would like to share.
Hi, guys. Thank you, Greg. Good to see you again. And I would just like to say I started off in slot cars, 1/32nd scale back in 1965. That's when my mom bought my first track. And I attribute my competitiveness to that, because no matter what, she wasn't going to win. I was going to win. And all through life, I've stayed competitive because of that. And I'm here. So I've been in it for the long haul. I've worked and just done it as a hobby on the side. I currently have on a 10x20, I have 85 linear foot of track, 4 lanes on the MDF. And I've always had this electric track before in cars. And I have several old stuff right now. I have Eldon and Electric and, just different things. So some AC stuff, and I really enjoy this. The COVID's kind of put her down on it, right? But we're going to get back together soon. I had a brain tumor about 5 years ago, and so my speech is a little off. Excuse me for that. Everything else is good, though. And I appreciate you letting me be in your group, Greg.
And I'm glad you can. I'm glad you can be here. And if you don't mind, if I could tell the story about the tumor.
Yeah, go.
Okay, so this kind of shows Russ's dedication to the club, the Analog Racing Club. So at the time, we were at his house racing on his track and having a grand old time. But Russ was kind of a little groggy, a little like maybe he had had a drink or something, but he hadn't. And then he's like, his wife started becoming more and more concerned about his behavior and decided to go ahead and take him to the doctor. But he said, no, you guys just go ahead and stay and finish your race night and everything. And so we're thinking, maybe he's, got low iron or something, something simple and easy. And so we continued racing and then, locked up after we left. Come to find out later that he went in and they checked him out and found that big old tumor in his head.
Yeah, egg size.
And then, yeah. I mean, geez. And then, of course, we were all praying for him and everything. And he pulled through. And next thing you know, didn't you build your current track after that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
After that.
You built a brand new routed track, big old swooping straight and bank turn and everything. It's a fantastic track to race at. Every car loves that track.
It's fast. It's a fast track.
Fast. But it's got those tricky bits on the infield you got to watch out for, that's for sure. Yeah, yep. Definitely a wonderful track. So, and I'm absolutely looking forward to coming back and racing at your house, Russ. So thank you for joining us. And for everybody who's watching, feel free to join. This isn't some kind of in club or anything like that. Just join in and talk and ask questions and stuff. Did you want to say anything else, Russ?
I'm gonna try to give you a little.
Oh yeah, there you go.
Get just centered.
Yeah, and even that doesn't really show how big that bank is. There you go. That's a better view. Shows how tall the bank is. You can reach under it.
That's my granddaughter racing there. Oh, that's yep. See her there and her mom.
Yep.
It's Shelby, and so it's a great track. I mean, it is fun. You know, I think record time on the track is probably 5.7. You know, with some pretty hot cars. Typically, it's run 7s and 8s.
Yeah, it's a fantastic track, and yeah, can't wait until we can start getting together. And wearing a mask while racing is no fun, but at least it lets us get together a little bit sooner.
Exactly. At least we can do it.
At least we can do it. Yeah, looking forward to that. Did anybody else have anything that they wanted to ask? We're still on the paint topic, but I think it sounds like we're that one's winding down. I do have some other topics in case anybody has any more about the paint. I'm gonna grab one from the box here. Let's go with, I'll just go with the next one on my list. Somebody asked for track designing tips or track designer programs. Like what would you say to somebody who's designing their first track? Does anybody want to hop in, or should I go first?
I'll just say I think sometimes less is more. I think one of the mistakes I see people make is try to cram as much track in square footage wise, and I think flow is a lot more important than distance. That's just my experience.
Yeah, and flow is one of those things that is hard to explain. Like, it's one of those things that you know a track has it after you've pulled the trigger on a car on that track. You can look at a layout all day long and think it has flow, but until you actually drive a car. But then eventually, if you're, like I've been designing tracks for years and years using a program called Track Power. It's no longer available. But you start to get a feel of how a track will drive from the more tracks you race on and the more tracks you design, the better feel you get for the design. For my part, when somebody asks me for recommendations or tips on designing a track, very much like Ron said, less is more. Do not go for a plate of spaghetti. The first thing I say is you're going to be turning thousands of laps. There's no need to make the lap itself long and repetitive because you're going to be doing so many laps. A single lap should have a variety of straights and turns of different radiuses and different lengths and things, so that from start to finish, you're doing something different the whole time, rather than just a bunch of standard turns going ziggity zaggity and curly Q and whatnot. That's tip number one. Tip number two, figure out how much space you can use it all. Make sure you can walk at least 3 sides around your layout, if not all 4, depending on how deep you make it. You need to be able to reach crashed cars and use as much space as you can, because you're going to want to eventually. Then start with the layout. Make the longest straight you can fit on your track. Start with the longest straight, whether that's along the long side or going on the diagonal, whatever. Cram the longest straight you can in there. And then connect the ends of the straight with a variety of turns. R2, R3, R4, getting tighter turns, getting wider turns, 90-degree hairpins, 180-degree hairpins, short straights, long straights, medium straights, connected with all kinds of radius turns so that every turn is different. Now, sometimes that means you have no flow whatsoever. So then you got to manipulate and tweak and play around. The other tip I like to include is make room for borders. Most track doesn't come with borders. If you're making a wood track or a plastic track, it doesn't matter. Make sure there's room for the cars to slide. So that means with plastics track, you're gonna either make your own or buy the manufacturer's borders and put them on. There should be border room on the outside of absolutely every turn. And then sliding out, you know, if your car is wagging on the outside of when it's exiting the turn, give it a little bit of border room there too. Because riding a wall is not really very fun. It's kind of cheating, and you just mess up the paint on your car. And so border room, straight, big. I usually discourage bridges because a lot of people will start doing the plate of spaghetti. There'll be bridges over bridges, and in reality you end up with a paper clip, and you've just made a complicated layout for no good reason. If you have a bridge, make one bridge and make it create an outside loop so that your lanes are even, which gets onto another subject that I'll be happy to talk about later, whether or not even lane length is important. But those are my track designing tips, and I think they apply equally to plastic track or wood track. Does anybody else have anything that they'd like to add or even disagree with me?
I wouldn't worry about riding the wall, especially if you're painting it like Alan suggests. You're going to have, you know, boat varnish on there, so it'll be good. It'll be good. I've personally experienced, and again, I'm just an infant compared to you guys. R1s, I'm just going to say it, suck. I don't like them. They're just way too tight. And you talk about flow, and I felt that because I had two of them in the track, and it just dragged it down. And it was my first attempt, so I guess maybe that's my excuse for naivete, but it just drags it down for me. And I took it apart, and I'm like, this just doesn't work. It's fun when you get, like you said, Greg, I had a big straight. It's like, yes, this is where I could just floor it for however many seconds or milliseconds or whatever. That's great. And then I had a big sweeper and some other stuff, and some straights fit in there. But when you got to those hard, tight R1s, it just slowed it all down, and it wasn't a flow to the whole thing. And that's important because, like you said, I'm going to be holding this trigger, or I'm going to be fluctuating a lot. I need some sort of flow, because if I can get a consistent this to here, to here, to here, a rhythm going, okay, now you start to get competitive, and everybody else is getting competitive as
And then
That's
also,
a whole nother topic with R1 turns. I'll debate that forever because I'm a fan of R1 turns, because basically flow does not mean high speed. Flow is not high speed. So putting an R1 turn in just means that you have to give it some thought as to why it's there. You know, does it have to be there? Can you enter the R1 with an R2, you know, and smooth it out a little bit, make a little parabolica or parabola or whatever. But I love me some R1 turns. I can drive any car around an R1 turn. You give me a track with an R1 and I'll like it better than that same track without an R1 in there. And rhythm is, you don't want a monotony. You want a complex rhythm. You want a merengue. You want some you know, changes in you know, the beat, not just the whole time, right? That's a point and shoot. That can be just as boring as a really long track. But now we're kind of getting off topic, so I'm gonna let Kelly go because he's got his hand raised. He was gonna talk about track design or R1s or whatever.
yes,
Go for it.
yes. Well, track design. Well, when you're designing, I mean, I'm a baby as well. I'm like Jeff, but you want to make sure you consider who's going to be racing. I mean, you don't. I mean, like you're saying the R1s and complex, but like for me, my track need to be simplistic because of the type of people who are going to be racing on it. If it's overly complicated, that's going to turn, if they can't maneuver the cars around, they're going to lose interest. They're going to lose interest. So for me, when I mean simplistic, I'm not saying it's just a big oval, but you do want to have some different turns in there, but simplistic enough to gain the interest of the people who I'm trying to portray it for.
So let me ask you,
Yeah.
did they not crash on those R2 turns?
Oh yeah, they crash.
So
They crash. But if like I like my first track I had was on a 6 by 12 foot table, and I jammed everything in this table. And I had R1s and I had multiple R1s, and it just was crash after crash after crash after crash. It slowed the races down because there was so many crashes. And it just, for me, I can maneuver it because it's my track. I mean, I was good at it, but for the people who was coming over for the first time, it slowed the race down so much that it just was not fun. So I ended up taking out all of them but one R1, and I called it a paper clip. Basically, it was a huge paper clip, and the flow was a lot better. And they had the R1, so you can't throttle it. You had to slow down, be able to maneuver around the turn. But I had long straightaways on the back wall and then the start lane, so then you can get your speed up. But I simplified it so for the purpose of the people that I was trying to get into my club who were new to the hobby. So like somebody like for yourself, no, I wouldn't set a track up like that for you because you're more experienced. You pretty much can drive anything. And so yes, a little bit more complex track would probably be better. But for like beginners and a beginner club, I would say something a little bit simplistic.
I won't argue with that. There's definitely a difference between an experienced racer and a newbie racer. And it's going to be similar to putting a newbie, putting a magless car into a newbie's hands. They don't understand throttle control, or they don't have throttle control, so they can't finesse the car around the turns and stuff like that. So I'll go ahead and put R1s in with magnets, just kind of jokingly. But I do have my party track has R1 turns in it, and I use that for birthday parties. So it's pretty much always kids who do nothing but hold the trigger down. And what I usually do is I slowly ramp up the power so that they kind of learn how to slow down, and they can slow down for the R1 turns. Once somebody learns, that they need to slow down more for an R1 than an R2 or an R3 or whatever like that, then they're usually okay with it, and then they get better and better with practices. But you're right, if you get a bunch of guys drinking and driving, you want to be able to just kind of move the trigger a little bit and not crash at every turn. And I would never advocate for a track that's like mostly or half or even a quarter R1 turns unless it's like a rally track and the whole point is to get the car sliding all over the place. I've seen plenty of those. Ninco was very popular for their very tightly compacted and very full layouts with lots and lots of R1 turns. You get the Ninco Master Track, and it was basically just zigzagging R1 turns with a couple of straights going back and forth. Russ, you had some things you wanted to add.
Yeah, I was just going to mention that one of the things you really want to pay attention to in the design phase is making sure that you can see the track from all angles. I mean, you really, we've raced, I'm sure you guys have, we raced on tracks that you can't even, it's a blind corner. You can't see it. Maybe there's a post there, but the corner's behind the post. So I really think, a lot of attention needs to be put on that, for just making sure that wherever the driver's stand is, you can see the complete track. And that's why you don't want to put a lot of bridges, because you can't see the car. So that was just it, Greg.
No, that's fantastic. That's the kind of stuff you want to add, and I agree completely. And I'm pretty sure both of us know a couple of tracks in the area who should seriously consider a redesign. One of them can't change where the posts are, but sometimes you can change the track. But yeah, absolutely. Keep in mind line of sight. From where your drivers are going to stand. When I design a track with a bridge, to even out the lanes, I'll think about where the drivers are likely to stand and what side of the bridge should be above versus below, so that you can, see the car when it's on a turn, rather than a straight, if it's covering, So yeah, line of sight, keep an eye on your car, knowing where your car is without having to pray that where your car is definitely a good thing, layout. Lloyd, Go ahead. You're still muted. There
I'm
you go.
back. Yeah. Just say good night to you all. It's 1:15 in the morning here, so I think it's time to go to bed.
All right. Good night, Lloyd. Thanks for coming and thanks for sharing. Hope to see you again.
Hope I'll try next time. Thanks. Bye.
Next time will be earlier, so you should be able to stay a little bit longer.
Thanks a lot. Bye.
All right. Bye-bye.
Hey, Greg,
Yes.
this is Mike. I have to leave as well. I want to thank you for organizing this. I appreciate it. I look forward to you guys' future chats and whatnot, and I'll keep reading and whatnot, and occasionally maybe you might see me posting in the Facebook, just trying to figure out what's going on.
Absolutely. Thanks for coming.
But
Hope to
I
see you again.
appreciate everything. I ended up dropping off. I lost my phone connection there for a little while when Alan was speaking about the braiding, so I apologize for that as well. But yeah, thanks again for putting this on, and I'll look forward to the next meetings and your guys' chats as well, okay?
Yeah, and I'll have this up on YouTube probably tonight or tomorrow morning so you can check up what you missed.
Okay, I appreciate it. Thanks a lot.
Thanks, Michael. See you.
Yep, take care.
All right. Did anybody else want to talk about track design? Lance, did you have something you wanted to say?
Yeah, can you hear me okay?
Yep, go for it.
Oh, okay. I kind of think that track height, the table height, might affect your marshaling ability, right? So if you make the tracks too tall, you can't reach over and get the cars. Marshaling's a big thing, right? If you tend to lower the track, keep it a good elevation off the floor so you can still store stuff under the track. But also, you know, like 32, 35 inches off the floor seems to be a pretty good place to start. You know, some people are taller, some people are shorter, to be able to marshal the whole track. And then you can have a wider track. The further you can reach over that track, you know, most people can reach a 4-foot, you know, the back side pretty easy. But if you're making a track that's a little deeper than that, 5 foot, you almost need it a little lower so that you can reach back to the back corners. Also, another comment I think is put the straightaway on the back stretch. A lot of squigglies, S-turns and stuff are kind of in far middle of tracks. And, you know, that's where most of the cars come off. And I just think that, you know, you put the straights with the bigger turns around the back length. I think that helps you out, marshaling wise.
Great point. And yeah, you want the height to be such that when you bend over to reach something, when you're reaching for something and you're having to bend into the track, that it's not, you know, digging into your gut like it does for me. So a little bit lower. I need to lower my track, speaking of that, but a little bit lower so you can bend your body as well as reach with your arms, but not so low that you end up having to put an arm down to hold yourself up from falling over while you're reaching really far. And of course, you know, don't have it so tall that you can't do anything but this, right? I've seen some tracks that are pretty high for some reason. And then, you know, if the track is lower, then you tend to have a more, you know, from the air view and have better visibility for a lot of the track too. So getting that sweet spot is definitely worth considering. And then the crashing, yeah.
The tracks that are set up high, kind of, I think those people like to have the perspective of the car at that height, but it sure is hard to marshal.
It absolutely is. And yeah, you can always sit in a chair and get that perspective when your table is a proper height. And like you were saying, you know, design your tracks so that crashes are easy to get. You know, a lot of people, like you said, put S's and stuff on the infield and the easy stuff on the outside, and your cars are always crashing in the middle. So when you're designing a track, you know, if you're, you know, laying plastic down or drawing a piece of paper, imagine your car going around that track, and if you crash here, where's the car going to end up? You know, if you crash on this turn, where's the car going to end up? And you can actually plan your design so that crashes are more likely to have the car go to the outside of the track than the inside of the track. So yeah, all these things are good to know. So hopefully this helps somebody out there who is wanting to know about track design tips. Did anybody else have any track design tips that they want to toss out before we change subjects? Alan?
Yeah, This is a little obscure. I'll try to make it a little bit less obscure. But it has a lot to do with how the track flows and how it feels. In typical slot racing terms, this is a difference between circular and elliptical routing. It applies primarily to routed tracks. It goes back to model railroad and real railroad practice of what's called an easement. And it's the practice of having all curves begin essentially as straights and then gradually increasing to the tightest radius that they are likely to achieve and then opening out at the other end. If you look, and there are a number of publications, mostly in the UK, about tricks to do this. There are ways to set up a router base to do it. The Loft-Linkert system of using splines to lay things out essentially does this automatically. But if you contrast the difference in behavior between going, into one of these elliptical curves versus going directly from a straight to, a sudden fixed radius, there's a big difference. This applies to some extent to plastic track as well, because you can at least emulate some of this by using the various radii that are available to start out with a wider radius, then to a next, and then to a next. It does make a lot of difference in the flow of the track. Last comment on the height of track. When I built a track a few years ago, again, split ups, house sale, and so forth have a tendency to make tracks go away. Mine was just a little bit over knee high. It made for very, very good visibility.
Yeah, I think there's one track in our club that was recently redone, and he put it used to be high, and he made it lower, and he kind of went the opposite direction. So now it's pretty much knee high. So that's one of the tracks where if you're leaning over for a crash in the middle, you got to put your hand down on it in order to not fall over onto the track. I see that Slothead has commented here. Does anybody have a choice between, or preference, or what do you do is sit or stand during racing? He says he likes to use stools that he got from IKEA, which work great. So I'm imagining like bar stool height. I have a couple of stools, but I don't tend to use them while I'm racing. I tend to stand while I'm racing, but it's always nice to have something to sit on if you're tired. Does anybody here have a preference? Russ, go ahead.
Greg?
He's muted.
Okay.
Oh,
So,
Eric, go ahead.
Sorry.
Okay, wait.
Oh.
Russ, go ahead.
Okay. All right. Sorry about that, guys. But I've got stools, and two different kinds of stools and chairs, tall chairs. Some people stand, some people sit. And I know it's, some people have issues and that they can't stand for very long. So that seems to work pretty good. And like Slyhead said, my chairs that are stools I got from IKEA. Super cheap. They got a back on them. They're nice, lightweight, and stackable. So that's what I tend to use at my house. So just want to let you know.
All right, Eric, go ahead.
Well, just real quick, stools. I found these stools on Facebook Marketplace. I think I paid about $20 each, about 7 or 8. So they work well. Myself, I like to stand, but I've got a stool for myself for other times. But a few of my friends, they like to sit. I don't know. My brother just likes to sit there and do this.
And Lance was showing off a wooden stool that apparently he keeps around for those purposes. I'll sit on if I'm just running laps, then I'll sit on a stool. But yeah, if I'm doing a race, then we do fairly short sprint racing, rotations and stuff like that. So I'm never having to stand for a very long time. But yeah, being able to sit when you're tired is definitely a good thing. Did anybody else have any thing that you wanted to toss in on that subject?
Yeah, this is Phil. I just joined in, but a lot of my racers, we stand because it's easier to go Marshal when you crash. But also, around the track, when you get stools and stuff, a lot of times it's harder to see when some of your drivers are standing up. And a lot of the drivers that I race with, they have a little dance they do. That's kind of the rhythm, how they see the rhythm. Yeah, that's it right there, Greg. Yeah, that dance is going on. I hate to break up a party, so I have stools for everybody. But, like you said, if I'm sitting, I'm just running laps, or I'm fooling around, I have a tendency to sit down and slow down in corners. But once it gets competition going, actually we stand up, and a lot of times we have digital, so it's 6 cars. You might have 7 or 8 people there. So your drivers are sort of marshaling at the same time. So a lot of standing goes on. Maybe that's a fitness program.
Take away the stools so everybody's forced to stand, and maybe put little stepper machines under their feet.
Yeah, I got to come up with a stand, like a Fitbit standing counter instead of a Fitbit step counter.
There you go. All right. Did anybody else want to chime in on that subject before we move on? Seeing none. Let's see. I want to go back in the chat because I missed these earlier. Slothead also asked, when we were talking about, I think this is probably when Alan was talking about his stainless steel motor pod and chassis and stuff like that. He says, regarding chassis, has anyone tried alternate materials such as styrene, circuit board, or carbon fiber? With the modern choices of adhesives, brass and solder aren't the only possibilities. So any of you customizers have experimented with other things, or just stick with your old standby? Or I think Alan is probably the most experienced chassis builder here. I don't know anybody else building chassis.
Yep. Am I muted or no muted?
Oh, I can hear you. Is that Chris?
Yep.
Yeah. So what about those different materials?
I build chassis out of steel, brass. I used to use circuit board. I'd use popsicle sticks. I'd use carbon fiber. I've used fiberglass. Soldering stuff together is so easy and so quick. Stainless steel is still the go-to material, EDM laser cut chassis for all the wing cars, all the fast stuff, because you can solder to it. Carbon fiber is great, but it only has strength in one direction. Very, very brittle in the other direction. So while it can flex in one way, it doesn't flex in the other way. So brass and piano wire is cheap, and it works just great. But again, you can, if your chassis is flat and your chassis is square, for the type of racing that most of the guys on this forum do with relatively slow motors, and I'm saying that in a comparative basis because 40K motors are still slow as far as I'm concerned. The power that those put out and the length of the tracks that most of the guys run on, there's no need to go to anything else whatsoever.
So, I mean, it sounds like you can make a chassis out of darn near anything you feel like making a chassis out of, but that doesn't necessarily mean it's better just because it's not soldered brass, right?
Brass has some things have some really great advantages. Piano wire has a memory, so it springs back. So all of the upper end chassis, and even the chassis that in the plastic car universe need some sort of torsional flex to them. That lets the outside rear tire compress more progressively and load in a corner, which improves grip and improves transitional response on the chassis and a whole bunch of things. Having said that, there's a bunch I do or used to do Saturday morning and Sunday morning seminars on chassis scratch building and all kinds of stuff. And I've built thousands of chassis over the years. The main thing is to get them flat and square. I've just been working with a guy in Jamaica who's emailing me and sending me pictures back and forth. And he saw the popsicle stick chassis online. And he's made a couple of those, and he's done a good job, and they're nice and flat and nice and square, and for slow motors and hard tires that we all run on, they work just fine. But at the end, yeah, I mean, you can build them out of popsicle, whatever you want to do, like have some fun. I mean, one of the neat thing about the hobby is trying something different, trying something new. Build it out of, God, you can, there's a guy who was in the proxies for a while or still is, but he's graduated a bit now. He used to make his chassis out of credit cards and glue credit cards together. And again, with a slow power motor, they're fine. They're just fine. So have some fun, do what you want to do. The materials, if you're not an experienced builder, the material is not going to make a whole bunch of difference what you do. I see in the proxies, and I see at our club, and I see guys bring cars into the shop that are, it doesn't matter, they're just hideous things. So you can't, and I've seen really simple, I've seen very, very simple designs, well executed, run great. And I've seen some real high-tech designs, poorly executed, that just run horribly. So there you go.
And Slothead wanted to clarify that his point was just to be creative with building materials. So, same as what you were saying, have fun. If you want to build it out of popsicle sticks, then build it out of popsicle sticks.
You can't, again, we all run on, most of us run on short little tracks with fairly tight relative corners. Every tire we use is hard by comparative sake compared to sponge tires and all the rest of the stuff. The chassis dynamics, a well-executed chassis with some dynamics, good dynamics, will beat a well-executed simple chassis. But a simple chassis, well executed, will way outperform a poorly executed high-tech chassis. And again, we're using really slow motors. So build it nice, flat, square, and watch it go around and have some fun. And no matter what you build and what you build it out of, it will improve your building skills. And that's the long-term, hopefully one of the long-term goals for, the folks in the hobby. So definitely.
And it does look like Slot has been kind of tossing chat things in here. So we're going to circle back to some of the paint talk. So Alan, you could probably address this one. He's asking how to get crisp lines for two-tone paint jobs. What would your tips be for that?
Well, probably my first comment would be to do something other than what I do. Couple of things you can do is use a very narrow masking tape to mask the edge that you're going to where the two paint colors meet, and then use other masking tape to extend that out to whatever coverage you need. One trick in doing that, because the issue is almost always bleed under the edge of the masking tape, is after you've masked and before you put on the second color, spray a coat of clear. Because that will, if there is any oozing underneath, it will be the clear. And that serves to seal the edge of the masking tape. That's about as much as I can do. I have not done too many two-tone cars. I would like to chime in and say that I agree with what Chris was saying 100%. Of course, anyone who knows his history and record in this hobby would be a damn fool not to agree with him. Just a note in passing on the popsicle stick chassis. I've never built one. I'm looking at some splints of rosewood that I have, just to build sort of an outrageous popsicle stick chassis. But thing to keep in mind is that if you're looking at issues of strength to weight or rigidity to weight, it is very, very difficult to beat wood. I raced a 17-foot racing dinghy for many years that was basically 3/8 inch plywood. And that hull didn't twist very much. Wood is very tough stuff and can be and can make a very good chassis. I also use all sorts of materials. This particular chassis happens to have a motor pod, which is machined aluminum. Now, obviously, soldering aluminum is an iffy proposition at best. So this is simply bolted into the rest of the wire and brass chassis. So you can mix materials any which way you want. I also agree that being lazy and impatient, I love soldering because you solder it, you wait 5 seconds for it to cool off, and it's done. You don't have to wait till the next morning to find out that your glue joint didn't work.
I've never done a brass chassis, but I've soldered things and definitely can't disagree with having fairly immediate results. And yeah, sometimes glue just doesn't dry, and it's very frustrating. You chose the wrong kind of glue, buddy. Sorry, start over. And to your yeah, my brain just farted. Anyways, does anybody have anything else they want to add or questions they want to ask before I dip back into my topic bucket? All right, here goes the dipping. Since we're winding down to the last 20 minutes, we'll just have a general fun topic. What is your favorite slot car? I'll start. My favorite slot car is the one I just got, and only because it's the coolest slot car in the world. Skilextric's Back to the Future DeLorean. Mic drop. Next.
Mine would be a monogram Lotus 38 124 scale.
Monogram 124th Lotus 38?
38.
I'm going to Google that while somebody else starts talking.
1965.
Mine would be Shadow DN4s.
From
3D printed.
NSR 68.
NSR P68? Yeah, those are fast cars. And the 3D printed Shadow, that's pretty cool. I've seen somebody building those. Who said that? I was in another screen.
I did.
Okay. Did you build it yourself?
Yeah, it's a file we all developed. Myself and a guy at Nimrod down in Australia.
Yeah.
So we've done files on all the Shadows now. We've got, I think there's 8 different Shadow models over the years, but the DN4 is it. Plus I became friends with the older gentleman in Wisconsin that owns 4 of the original Shadows. He's bought them up. So
Nice.
He'll be at Road America this summer. A bunch of us are going down there. You should all come. It's the 50th, I think, anniversary for Can-Am. So it's going to be quite a day.
That's cool. I want to share my screen so that you guys can see the car that Chris was talking about. Let me just make sure I'm doing it right here. Okay, let me click that, and then this one, and then share. Okay. Can you guys see this guy here? Oh, I clicked it. There we go. Chris, can you see that? Is that the one you're talking about?
That'd be it.
Awesome. Yeah, that's a pretty cool. We call those, or I call those because I'm unfamiliar with them. I call them the cigar cars because they're the early open wheelers. Look like cigars on wheels.
Whose model is that?
This is the monogram.
Okay.
38 monogram.
Okay.
When slot cars were actually good.
Yeah, I had some Coxes back in the day.
Well, I've got most of everything still.
Yeah, Cox made a beautiful one. I remember it.
Well, they've got, they made 8 or 9 different cars, but only 2 F1 cars. They made the Ferrari 158 and the BRMP 261.
Was that it?
For Formula One cars, yes.
Okay.
And no Indy cars. This is Jimmy Clark's Indy car from 65, I think. 64.
Okay. Nice model.
Expensive.
I'll bet.
Lance or Phil or Kelly, did anybody else want to chime in with your favorite slot car? I guess they're still thinking. Did you go grab something, Phil?
Actually, I did go grab something because when I saw that cigar car, I thought, you know, I'm around the Gilmore Car Museum, and this Eagle Gurney Westlake V12. I don't know if everybody can see that, but it's one of my favorite cars. But it's also because upstairs on my, I don't know what I call this table, but there's a table upstairs that I have, and there's a book there that actually, I didn't buy them together, but I bought the slot car, and then I was at the museum, and there was the car on the cover of this little thin hardcover book about Dan Gurney, and I thought, oh, that's pretty cool. So that's one of my favorite pieces. But if I was to say my favorite car, like what car is my go-to car when I fire up my track, it's always the Scalextrics BMW Z4. I got a bunch of those things. My favorite livery is the Turner Motorsports livery, which I do have one sitting down here that I really don't run it because I like it so much. So it's only a shelf queen because all the other ones keep running, but it's destined. I've actually had it out of the box, so I can't say I've got anything that's a shelf queen that stays in the box. It's usually my intent when I buy them, but then you're like, what good's a car if it's not rolling? So then you have to run the thing. But I try to take care of it. But that Scalextrics BMW Z4 Turner Motorsports livery is arguably the car I think is the coolest. And I got to stand next to the real one at the Detroit Grand Prix, so that was pretty good. So that's my car.
That's pretty cool. And I'll just read Slothead's comment. He says his favorite car is the Fly Porsche 917/10. I know what a 917 is, but what's the difference between a 917, or what's so special about a 10 version of the 917? I don't know.
No roof.
What's that?
Can-Am car-ish.
Well, I'm familiar with the Porsche 917. Are they all 917/10, or what's
917, 10, 20, 30.
What does the number at the end indicate?
Just the 917 30s were all the Mark Donohue Penske Can-Am 917s. The early 917s, the Le Mans cars, all were like 2-seater coupes. They all had roofs on, endurance racing and stuff like that. And then they had 917 variations. Couple ran in Can-Am, proper Can-Am. Tony Dean ran one for years. If you Google one of those up, you'll find out what that looks like as well.
Okay, Greg, I just Googled, I did the Greg, I Googled it, right?
Yep.
The /10, you know, I just Googled the car. But what was cool was when I was a kid, AFX had one of those. That was an L&M car.
Right.
So that LM, I don't know if you remember that white LM AFX car that was Can-Am style car, but that thing is I'm looking at photos and that's what I see. It is a cool car. That is a really cool car.
Yeah, I just Googled it too. It looks, of course, now I'm remembering, the slot car versions of them. So yeah, there's definitely cool cars. Anybody else want to chime in on favorite car?
I'll chime in. I'm like I said, I'm fairly new, so most of my cars are SCX. So my favorite car would be DTM, Opel, Austria, V8 Coupe.
Why that car specifically?
Just because the way it handles on the track. I mean, I have the BMW, I have the Mercedes DTM, and then I have the Corvette as well, GTs, and I like the way it handles. That version of the car has a less powerful engine, so it's not as fast as the other cars, but the handling of the car makes up for the difference in the less power of the engine. And then it looks cool.
Yeah, I'm sure people are picking cars based on looks and performance. I mean, in reality, my favorite car is almost always going to be the Audi R8 GT3 Bilstein livery. I don't remember what specific moniker that had, but it's that blue and yellow car, and I love the shape of the Audi R8 GT car. It looks pretty sweet, and of course blue and yellow. So that's actually my favorite car. I've got like any brand that makes that car, I go ahead and buy it. I've got the Scale Auto 124th version. I've got the Carrera 124th version, and I keep waiting for NSR to make theirs. Anyways, yeah, that's my favorite car. Alan, did you have a favorite car?
Well, I'm sort of fickle. I have two classes of favorites. One is whatever is on the bench, which is posing the newest unmet or unseen challenge. And at the moment, that's there it is, a Ferguson P99 with four-wheel drive.
Is that Dave Jones' body?
Yes, this is a Dave Jones body.
Okay.
And it's damn small. The other will be whatever I have, which in our local racing groups gives me some kind of an edge in the class to compensate for failing eyesight and reflexes. And that car at the moment is a modified Thunderslot Lola T70.
I've heard a lot of good things about the Thunderslots, and I have not gotten a hold of one myself. I think somebody brought one and put it up for our King of the Hill race, so we all got to race that car, and that was a pretty darn good car. So one of these days I need to grab me a Thunderslot, I guess.
The local rules required a motor change to fit this particular class. And while I was doing that, I did a little fiddling with the chassis and installed ball bearings on it. And I changed the gear set because I did not like the way the Thunderslot gears felt.
What didn't you like about the gears? Was it the ratio or just?
No, I could feel them. I could feel them engaging. And to my mind, a good set of gears feels almost like a belt drive.
Too much lash.
Pinions.
Go ahead, Chris.
Plastic pinions.
Yeah. They should be banned.
Plastic pinions.
Question for Alan. Do you have a bunch of Dave Jones bodies?
Yes, I do.
Okay, good, because I was going to offer you some more.
Oh, God. Chris, I have so many projects sitting here, and I've just taken on another one, much against my logical better judgment, a Morgan 4.4. I probably have 25 years worth of building to do with what I already have in stock, and I'm 84 years old. The numbers don't work.
I hear you. I hear you.
You can do it. So that you said that car was four-wheel drive. Does that mean the model is going to be four-wheel drive?
Yes.
Is that going to be with two motors or just how are you going to do it?
To quote from Peter Ustinov's Grand Prix of Gibraltar, and if anyone has not heard or listened to that, I advise it. The first time I built the model was a it was one motor with a jack shaft to the rear so I could have a full cockpit. It sort of worked. My initial thought when I started on the four-wheel drive one was to get an FF050 motor with dual shafts. Well, it turns out that they're about as easy to find as unicorn horns or philosopher's stones. They don't exist. So at the moment, the plan is to use a pair of 030 motors, each driving one axle. I am not concerned. As a matter of fact, I'm deliberately setting it up, and this might be something that someone would want to comment on, so that the speed is not exactly matched front to rear.
Right.
I'm curious to see what would happen if the front wheels are slightly overdriven compared to the rear wheels.
What about using those one-way bearings that Slotted makes?
I didn't know they did that.
For their four-wheel drive car, they made one-way bearings for the front to make sure that when the car is powering around a turn, that the one wheel going faster than the motor is actually turning doesn't cause problems. So I believe just the front wheels use one-way bearings, and the back wheels, and it's the front wheels are powered with my brain is farting. The like a timing chain cable
belt drive.
Belt drive, yeah. So yeah, they have teeny weeny little one-way bearings.
I'll have to think about that. The thing I'm thinking about is, slot cars cannot understeer. They're either, it's a zero-sum game. They're in or out. Slot cars go off the track because the rear end swings out too far, or it starts to swing out on the rear, and the outside wheel catches and flips them. I'm curious to see what happens if the speed of the front is biased to be slightly faster than the speed of the back, see if that will have any effect on basically holding the rear in line.
The only chance you've got is if the front spin a little quicker than the rear.
Yeah, that's what I'm planning on.
Right. I've seen 50 four-wheel drive cars, all the commercial cars, and when Rusket did the Black Widows and blah blah blah. If the rears overrun the fronts, it's a disaster. So you've got to have the front end spinning quicker than the rear end.
Well, it turns out that the motors that I have are not absolutely zero timed. And what I've found is that they have, a little bit more oomph in one direction than the other. And I'm going to use that in setting up the drives with the front deliberately biased to pull a little bit harder than the rear.
Yeah, I'd play with a tooth or two on the crowns as well too.
Yeah, good point.
So a big difference. I wonder if Slotted has, and because I never counted the teeth or anything, I wasn't that into it. I only had just one of their four-wheel drive LMP cars. I wonder if they went so far as to change the ratio so that the front wheels actually spin a little bit faster. I know that thing just pulls itself around the turns, so it doesn't seem to be hampering anything by having the front wheels powered. So I don't know, maybe they did that.
Yeah, it could be. Obviously the solid way to do it would be to use a jack shaft and simply change the gearing front and rear. But with this body, you put a motor in it, not a hell of a lot of room left for a jack shaft.
Yeah.
All right, well, we are nearing the 2-hour mark, and we'll chat a little bit longer. I'm gonna stop the recording at 2 hours in about 5 minutes, but we'll keep the chat open if you want to hang around and just kind of randomly chat. Does anybody have any last questions or comments or anything? I don't think I'll pull out a whole nother topic, but have some just kind of impromptu chit chat here for the last couple minutes. How's everybody's day going? Pretty good? Staying safe? Staying healthy?
We're here, aren't we?
Greg,
We're here.
Greg, I got a question for you.
Go ahead.
Okay, so this is the first time I've gone onto this site and the first time I've used Zoom. Is there a way to see everyone at once?
Yep, up in the top right corner of the screen that you're viewing. I'm not sure if you're on a computer or whatever, but there might be something that says gallery view or speaker view or a little grid of dots. If you see like a grid of 9 dots, click on that and you should get the gallery view rather than just a specific person. But I'd have to see your interface to know for sure. But yeah, there is definitely a way to switch it so that you're not looking at just one face all the time, that you can see a bunch of faces like on the recording. So look for an option. Did you find it?
No, I'm looking for it though.
Yeah, keep looking for something that either says gallery view or if it says speaker view, click on that to switch. You're probably on speaker view if you only see one person. So yeah, click around, look for stuff, and you know, you can do just a person to person. Of course, I guess, yeah, you don't get gallery view option if there's only one other person to talk to. So
yeah,
it's in there somewhere.
Yeah, it's there, and I'm using Firefox on a MacBook Pro.
So you're doing it in the browser. You didn't download the Zoom program itself. That's fine.
Yeah, well, I tried, and I ran into the same problem I had last week. It wanted a number and a password.
Okay.
So I used the browser.
Yeah, it's in there somewhere, Russ. I'm sure you'll find it eventually.
Yeah.
On the iPad, it's on the left side.
The left side, so it's gonna, yeah.
It's just a box full of squares. Just tap on it.
I know what you're talking about, but I don't see it. I'm in on the browser also. And I've got a green shield on the left.
All right, I'm going to go ahead and end the recording. Like I said, stick around and chat some more. For everybody who's watching us online, thanks for watching and hope to see you next week. Bye.
Thanks a lot. Thanks.